it's me, Crystal, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new to macrame, you may be wondering, where do I start? What supplies do I need? Where do I even start? Well, today I'm going to share 5 super helpful tips that will help you go from to yeah. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of my future videos. All right, let's get started with these 5 super helpful beginner macrame tips. Tip number 1, start with a simple project. I know what it's like to be cruising around on Pinterest and Instagram and you see this macrame project that is just gorgeous and you want to make it now. But if this is your first project, you should probably just pin that one for later and start small. Unless, of course, you enjoy being frustrated. Now, it's true that macrame really is pretty simple, and most of the projects you see are made with just a few different knots. But you really need to practice those knots and get a really good feel for what it feels like to tie them and how to make them look nice and neat so that your finished project will look the way you want it to. A simple keychain is a great first project. And then from there, you can make a plant hanger and then maybe a small wall hanging. The good news is those smaller projects take a lot less time to finish, so by the time you're done with those, your skills will have improved hugely and it won't have taken you forever, so you won't end up super frustrated. Then whenever you move on to that bigger project, you don't have to learn the basics, you got it down, and you're ready to tackle it. Okay, shameless plug time. If you are a beginner and you're looking to go from complete newbie who's never macrame before to making that big, cool macrame wall hanging or whatever you're wanting to make, I have a course called Macrame Simplified that will take you from complete beginner to macrame pro in a very short period of time. It's got easy step-by-step videos, simple patterns that go from like really easy to a little bit more advanced, and I walk you through the whole process, and by the end of it, you'll know what you're doing. I will put a link to that down below in the description. Tip number 2, choosing the right macrame cords. So there are a lot of different materials that you can use for macrame. Most of the time you see things made with natural cotton cords, like these ones, but you can macrame with lots of different things like jute or hemp, or there's synthetic cords, or you can even macrame with yarn, although it's kind of hard to do. All of these cords have different qualities, and you want to make sure that the qualities that they have work well with the project you're wanting to make. Let's just back up and assume you'll be using a natural cotton macrame cord for your project. There's a few different options to keep in mind, like will you be using string, rope, or cord? And yes, there is a difference. String is referring to single strand macrame cotton string, and it's beautiful and makes gorgeous fringe. But it can be very tricky for new macrame artists to work with because it likes to untwist on you when you're working. You have to remember to twist it as you go to keep your knots looking nice and neat. Rope is referring to twisted cotton rope that is like plied. Sometimes it's 2, 3, or 4 plies. And this is stronger than macrame string, and it can hold more weight. It's really good for things like plant hangers and anything that's gonna hold some weight, and then you can use it for wall hangings and really for anything. It has kind of that ropey texture, so that's something to keep in mind. Cord technically means braided macrame cord, although I tend to use the term cord generically and just use it as a catch-all for all types of rope, string, and cord and all that. But with actual braided macrame cord, it tends to be kind of stretchy, and although it's easy to tie knots with it, the stretchiness factor kind of makes it a little tricky, especially when it comes to cutting your cord pieces to the right length. I always have a horrible time when I'm cutting macrame cord to a certain size. All of my pieces end up being a different size. So, because it's stretchy and when you're measuring it, you know, it's hard to get it accurate. Not saying you shouldn't use it because it is great for certain things and the texture is really cool. It's just things you gotta keep in mind. So which one should you choose? Well, I would recommend choosing an easy beginner pattern and just using whatever it calls for. For instance, this macrame keychain tutorial from my channel and my blog uses single strand macrame cord, but it's a small project, and because of the kind of knot, the spiral half knot that we're doing with it, it's unlikely to get messy on you like if you were making a whole wall hanging out of single strand cotton, so it's still beginner friendly. Now, if you wanted to make a plant hanger for your first project, I would recommend twisted cotton rope, because it's durable and easy to work with. And I really like it for plant hangers. One more very important thing to keep in mind is if a pattern calls for a specific size of cord, you want to stick with what it calls for and not try to sub a different size when you're first starting out, because it does affect how long you need the cords to be. If you go up a size, like if it calls for 4mm rope and you want to use 5mm rope, you need to make your pieces of cord longer than it calls for. Whereas if it called for 4mm rope and you wanted to use 3mm rope, you'd end up with more waist cord if you cut it the size they said, because if you size down, you want to cut your cords a little bit shorter. And that's totally doable, and I even have a calculator that I have in my shop that kind of helps you with that. But when you're a beginner, you don't want to mess with math. You don't want to deal with all that. You just want to make something and get some skills, get some confidence, and improve your knotting ability. So I really suggest just sticking with what the pattern says at first as best you can. While we're talking about macrame cord size, I just wanted to mention that macrame cord is measured in millimeters. So the millimeters refer to the thickness of the cord. The most common sizes that you'll see when you're doing macrame projects are 3, 4, and 5mm, but it goes all the way from 1mm up to like 25mm, and it probably gets even bigger than that. I don't know. For instance, here's a piece of 25mm rope that I have in my stash, and you can see it's pretty big. So just use what the pattern calls for and you'll be in good shape. Okay, so now you have to decide where you're gonna get your cord. There are several places where you can go to buy macrame cord, and I know most people will probably just hop online and go on Amazon. I know that's where I went whenever I first started. Some of the cords on Amazon are perfectly fine, and there's actually some good ones on there. But there are also some very questionable ones, and I have gotten some before that smelled so bad like chemicals that I couldn't even use it. And that's no fun. So you really wanna be careful and check the reviews. Also ask people in macrame groups, other people who macrame, ask them where they get their cord. I'll tell you where I get my cord. My two favorite shops are Gansett, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, and Neuroma Studio. And I'll put a link to both of them down in the description. They're both based in the US, which is where I'm from, and they are really, really great. There's lots of other places you can buy macrame cord. That's by no means the only two. That's just my personal two favorite. So I'm definitely gonna link to those down below. And then I also have a blog post on my website where I go through a whole big long list of different places to buy macrame cord that are in different countries and all over the place, and I will also link to that in the description. All right, tip number 3, learn the 5 basic knots. Yes, that's right, I said 5. If you know those 5 knots, you can make almost any project you could imagine. Now that's not saying that's all there is. There's lots more knots you can learn, but those 5 are like the most important and the ones you're gonna be using all the time. And you could totally make projects completely with these knots and it would look amazing just by the different configurations of these 5 basic knots. You can make keychains, plant hangers, jewelry, wall hangings, you name it. Here are the 5 important knots that you need to know. The lark's head knot, and also the cow hitch knot, which is just the lark's head knot in reverse. It's basically the same thing, just flipped around the other way. The square knot, the spiral half knot, the double half hitch knot, and the wrapping knot. And to be even more helpful, I have a free knot guide for you that if you don't know those 5 basic macrame knots, you can go download it and get started right away. And I also have a video tutorial to go along with it. Here's my printable macrame knot guide. You see, it's like 15 pages long, 15 pages of very helpful tutorials, full color. Look at that. So I'm going to put a link down in the description where you can grab yours. I also have a video about those 5 knots that I will link to down below as well. Definitely check that out if you are new, because it will get you started, and it is very important to learn those 5 knots, and they're not hard. You can totally do this. I believe in you. Tip number 4, relax and enjoy the process. All right, this might sound cliche, but it really will make a huge difference in your macrame experience. If you start off with a nice, simple project, you can really just relax into it and focus on getting better at those basic knots and just enjoy the process. It'll help center you, and it's very meditative whenever you really sit down and just start knotting and just let everything else go. Macrame really is a great mindfulness exercise. I know it helps me calm calm down my crazy brain and just center myself and just stop thinking about everything all the time and just make you sit down and focus on something else besides everything else. If you're like me and maybe a little ADD, macrame is a great way to help you just focus, breathe, tie knots, and chill. And I think we need more of that today, don't you? And macrame tip number 5, keep on knotting. Okay, seriously, it's true that practice makes perfect, and macrame is no different. The more knots you tie, the better you'll get at it, and then the happier you'll be with your finished projects. If one knot is giving you trouble, I recommend making a whole wall hanging out of it. By the time you're done with it, it won't give you trouble anymore. You'll have it down. Practice, practice, practice. And after you make your first project, you may be completely happy with it. Maybe it turned out just the way you wanted it to, but if it didn't, don't be discouraged. Just keep making more projects. My first macrame project, looking back on it, was not the best because I didn't quite get the double half hitch knot at first, which so many people struggle with. I didn't quite wrap my head around how it worked. But by the end of the project, it clicked, and you can see a world of difference from the top of the thing to the bottom of the thing. And then my next project, it was no problem. I got it. So that's just how it goes. You just gotta practice. You gotta keep knotting. And if you keep knotting, you'll get better at it. Not to mention, you'll be happier because of it. I hope you found this list of 5 macrame tips as helpful as I said it was going to be. And if you did, please leave a big thumbs up. And if you didn't, well, I'm sorry, I tried. All right, so here is another video that I think you will enjoy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.